I can't figure it out myself. I mean, as you said, vehicles generally depreciate, right? And this is by no means a classic, that's for sure. And the ministry, when I mentioned it to them, they just sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, "Just go get an appraisal at your own cost, and then we'll see what happens."
David Menzies for Rebel News here in Richmond Hill, Ontario. And you know, folks, vehicles, unlike, say, real estate, well, the moment you drive them off the lot, that's when the depreciation factor kicks in. But apparently not when the government gets involved. Case in point, I'm standing with Richmond Hill resident Brian Pressament, and he was planning on putting up for sale his 2011 Scion TC. Just one problem: Service Ontario has somehow inexplicably deemed that this vehicle in the past 6 years is now worth more than twice what Brian originally paid for it back in 2018. Now, Brian, this is an incredible story. Just so we have all the facts right, you bought this 2011 Scion TC in 2018. It was then 7 years old. It had about 130,000 kilometers on it. You paid how much back then, and what is Service Ontario telling you how much it is worth today?
So we bought it. It was a car that we bought for our daughter, so she could go back and forth to university, and we paid about $7,000 for the car back in 2018, which is what the ministry said the car was worth at that time.
And you wanted to sell the car now. It's lived out its life, I suppose. So it's 6 years later. A $7,000 car is somehow now worth, according to Service Ontario, $15,000?
I guess so. I guess you put $100,000 and change on the car, and it appreciates in value. That's the only thing I can think of. And the challenge is now that if we sell it, I mean, it's for sale for about $2,000. The taxes are going to be higher than the price of the car. Doesn't make sense.
Simply because the valuation of the vehicle, and also I forgot to mention, Brian, in those past 6 years of ownership, the mileage is now more than double. Correct? It's more than 260,000 kilometers.
The mileage is more than doubled. There's a few more dents and scratches on the car, and of course the wear and tear on the car that with the mileage.
So, Brian, I'm trying to understand this. I wasn't dealing with Service Ontario. You were. More than double the mileage, years worth more of wear and tear. It's 6 years older. By anyone's math, how is this vehicle worth more than double what you paid for it back in 2018?
I can't figure it out myself. I mean, as you said, vehicles generally depreciate, right? And this is by no means a classic, that's for sure. And the ministry, when I mentioned it to them, they just sort of shrugged their shoulders and said, "Just go get an appraisal at your own cost, and then we'll see what happens."
And you know, folks, we did reach out to the Ontario ministry that oversees the Service Ontario franchises, and reached out twice, actually. They didn't even acknowledge my emails. So we did try to get their side of the story, because I sure can't figure it out. And Brian, it should be noted, I think you reached out to, was it Car Gurus? And what did they offer you for this vehicle?
So there's a couple sites they reached out to, Car Gurus and Clutch, and they were offering something in the neighborhood of $1,500 for the car.
So 10% of what Service Ontario says it's worth.
Correct, yes.
Okay, then. Now, I think you mentioned off camera you went to local dealerships, the Richmond Hill Toyota, Richmond Hill Lexus, because Scion, and I think this adds to the depreciation factor, it no longer exists as a brand. Toyota abandoned that brand. They basically said, what, it's worthless?
Yeah, they wouldn't have it on their lot. They wouldn't want it. And the other challenge too is because it's a discontinued brand, we're concerned about parts replacements as well for the car. They may not be available anymore.
Yeah, I understand. I think it was discontinued 8 years ago. By law, they have to make parts available for 10 years, which is 2 years away now. I don't know what you're going to do. Have you thought this through? Because it looks like Service Ontario isn't budging. I mean, is it a matter of taking that $1,500 and putting it in the bank?
That's what I'm going to have to do, or donate it to a charity of some type. They'll give me a tax receipt for it that might be worth more than the value of the car, if at all.
Hey, folks, I know you love it when Rebel News brings you the other side of the story, but the fact is, we need your help. Unlike the mainstream media, we do not receive a nickel's worth of government funding, nor would we accept it if ever offered, just in case, hell froze over. But you know what? We need your help. Can you please go to rebelfieldreports.com? That's rebelfieldreports.com. And if you're able to, kindly make a donation.